Welcome to the Only Women Entrepreneurs podcast, also known as O. I'm Rosemary Cescolini, your host, former high school teacher turned successful entrepreneur simply by pursuing an alternative career in manufacturing. Now I run O, an initiative designed to empower young women to explore careers in construction, manufacturing, and entrepreneurship. Here you'll discover inspiring success stories, valuable insights, challenges, and obstacles faced by everyday women. They've become their own bosses and paved the way for generations of female entrepreneurs. I will also feature guests who are my clients, as well as women I've collaborated with on a variety of personal projects. I'm so excited to speak to our guest, and let's get started right now. Our guest on the show today was introduced to me by one of my marketing reps, Holly Wyatt of Kinetic Brands. With a background in multimedia design and production as a postgraduate certificate in artisan distilling, Miranda Mazur's passion for crafting unique drinks stems from her time in the Canadian Armed Forces, where she learned about military traditions associated with spirits. In a male-dominated space, she fearlessly created Ironside Distilling, overcoming challenges like material shortages and extensive regulations, just to name a few. Join us as Miranda shares her pursuit of fulfillment, being her own boss, and her inspiring path in entrepreneurship in a male-dominated industry. Get ready for an empowering and captivating story of unbounded spirits. Hello, Miranda. I'd like to say
Hi,
thank you.
Rosemary. It's
Thank you
great to
so
be
much
here.
for
Thank you.
coming on the show. And thank you for your military service to our country. That is unbelievable and a very precious gift you give to all our freedoms. I'm so grateful for both of them.
Thank you. It was my pleasure. It was probably the best job I ever had up until now.
Well, we'll get into the both your careers because they're types of careers that are obviously you're a minority in there, and it's very difficult to make your way through them. But I appreciate and applaud your courage. It's something that I did in the past, and I will reflect back on my manufacturing experience as the conversation progresses. But let's get started. So your journey from being a member of the Canadian Armed Forces to becoming a successful entrepreneur at Ironside Distilling is really inspiring. So, how do you feel your experiences and learnings from your time in the military have shaped your approach to entrepreneurship?
Well, there was a few things in my career that would have contributed to my leadership style and kind of how I do business. And a lot of it just stemmed from looking at my own mentors in the military and the types of leadership that I liked and I thrived under, and the types of leadership that I didn't really thrive so well under. And just working with a plethora of different people from different backgrounds, different socioeconomic situations, it really forces you to look outside the box and not have judgment and just kind of broaden your horizons when it comes to approaching people and situations as a whole, whether it be entrepreneurship, specific missions, or I mean, even tackling homework. It could be it actually just being in that environment and being open to learning new things is probably the biggest takeaway.
That's interesting. You mentioned your mentors, and I'm really curious, were they predominantly male or were there some females that were good mentors for you and guided you towards this path? Any standout?
They oddly they were predominantly male. Um,
Which is not a bad thing, right?
Shocker. But yeah, actually, some of the best people that I worked with were male, and but they it was great working with them because they didn't see gender, they didn't see sex, they saw a soldier whether you could do your job or not, and they didn't treat me any differently based on my occupation within the military. They didn't treat me any differently because I was a female. They treated me like they treated any other soldier. They gave me the benefit of the doubt, just like they would anybody else. They gave me a blast of crap if I screwed up, just like anybody else. And it was because they didn't treat me any differently and they didn't coddle me that made them such fantastic mentors. And they they were the type of mentors to actually listen to their troops. They didn't necessarily always get hung up on rank or structure or anything like that. It was because they were just generally willing to listen and see what their troops needed or wanted in order to succeed, and then they would do their best to do that.
Wow, that this description is totally eye-opening because it's really nice to hear firsthand that it appears that you had a pretty overall positive experience in the military, and that's
I
great. That
did.
could encourage other women that are thinking of a career in the military to pursue it once they hear you talking so fondly of it. That's fantastic.
It was great. I loved it. It was an amazing job.
Good, good. So it's fascinating to hear about your exposure to various military traditions, and it ignited a natural passion and curiosity for developing drinks. So, can you
Yes.
just go a little deeper into how those traditions influenced your decision to pursue a career as a distiller, and how they continue to inspire your passion for developing new and innovative beverages?
So within the military, and I didn't know this when I first got in. It took a couple of years, oddly enough, for me to actually catch on to this. But there was always certain things, certain traditions that accompanied certain situations. And for instance, we would have our men's Christmas dinner, and there was always a certain type of port that was on the table for certain type of toasts. When with my regiment in particular, um, Calvados was a particular spirit that we would always use during or after certain celebrations like D-Day, because my regiment was involved in D-Day. Um, and on the 11th of June, we actually lost an entire squadron
Oh,
of my regiment
sorry to
in
hear
the
that.
Battle of La Patrie. So, in order to commemorate them, we would toast with Calvados, and it was always Calvados. And when we would, what we call uncasing the guidon, so it's our battle honor flag that was in a special case. So, whenever we would take that case off, to bear that flag for parades, they would always, the guidon party would always have a shot of whiskey and say a toast to the guidon before uncasing the guidon. So it was all these little things that just gradually built up over my career
Right.
that got me interested in spirits as a whole, and kind of why it was those particular spirits or why it was those particular traditions that involved them. And guys are very particular about what they drink. They are very, a lot of them are really superstitious,
Yes.
and it has to be a certain type of whiskey, or it has to be a certain type of beer, or it has to be a certain type of port. And it's like hockey players in the playoffs, like they don't change their socks or whatever for
Yeah,
however long,
I
or
was
they
thinking
don't shave
about
their
that.
playoff beards or whatever. So it's kind of the same situation, only in a lot of this case, it revolved around toasting and toasting to the fallen, toasting the memories, toasting to things to come. So that's what got me interested in it at first, but I noticed it was always the same. And not that I was opposed to that, like, because I love routine, but it got me thinking that, well, why aren't they doing it with something else? Like, why aren't they toasting with gin instead of whiskey? Or why does it always have to be port on the table? Why can't it be champagne? Or, and it got me thinking about how at some point in time things could be changed up a little bit while still remaining true and respective of the traditions that are established. So
Well,
yeah, that's kind of where
this
that
is
came from.
totally enlightening. History would be so much more exciting in school if they actually would incorporate just what you told us about the traditions and the different spirits. Because sometimes you just see, the very blend of what the military does, but you don't see the true sister and brotherhood that is under one common flag, right? And I tell you, I've been very, very, very inspired by listening to this, and now I'm getting more intrigued as the interview continues. So, honestly speaking, when your younger self,
Mhm.
did you ever have an inkling that you would go down this path and become a distiller?
Not even a little bit.
So it's totally the influence of the military that got you started
A lot
thinking
of it,
about it.
yeah.
Yeah.
Because no, this is going to sound terrible, and it's not meant to come across like it's going to, but like a lot of the best memories that I have from my career somehow involve alcohol to some extent,
Yeah.
whether it's the toasting or the Christmas dinners or the mess dinners or um, the trip to Vimy Ridge when I went to Vimy Ridge in 2017 with the regiment. Um, and seeing and experiencing new and different alcohols over in Europe, and even just hanging out at the mess on a Thursday night after a parade night and just having a couple beers with my friends, and just having all different types of conversations, whether it be philosophical or just general ranting of what happened that day.
Right.
It all somehow stems back to involving alcohol, and it always seemed to bring people together. It never drove a wedge in between anybody. It never started arguments, or it was never a bad thing. It was never a faux pas. It was always like just encouraged to hang out and get to know your fellow troops and get to know the guys in your regiment. And it all somehow boiled down to involving at least a couple beers.
And you know what you just said, nothing wrong with that. That's just creating bonds and friendships and relationships for a lifetime. I'm sure that you guys drank responsibly, and
Oh
it's
yes.
like well, it's like everything, you know. If you take the right actions, the alcohol's there to be enjoyed with your friends as a social opportunity, and why wouldn't it be in the military either? Because you guys are put under considerable amount of stress and pressure, and you're human. You have feelings. You see
Mm-hmm.
things that could be very, very disturbing and psychologically traumatic. So you need to release and relax and be able to overcome tragedies that you may witness firsthand. So I really don't see anything negative in that. I think it's a wonderful tradition, and I want to look forward to hearing more about it.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun, but like I said, it always brought us together. It
That's
was
great.
it was just our thing. It was grab a drink, talk about the day, or grab a drink and toast to whoever, or
Right.
um, Christmas parties. Grab a drink, go have dinner. It was great.
That's good. So, was there anyone in your life who helped guide you and maybe gave you a little push towards being a distiller or an entrepreneur?
I would honestly, my husband was probably my biggest advocate. He was my biggest advocate and my biggest supporter, and my sometimes biggest pain in the butt with pushing me out the door. But I was kind of struggling after I retired from the military. And of course, I retired right as COVID hit. So I went from having a structure and routine and everything to not being able to leave my house, which I wasn't totally opposed to,
Right.
but
It was hard on
it made
everybody.
the it made the transition especially difficult. And um, I was originally looking at going into the brewmaster program at Niagara as opposed to distilling. And I was humming and hawing about it. And he goes, "Well, what do you drink more?" And he's just like, "You always drink spirits. Like at functions, you're always drinking spirits.
Right.
You're just like, you don't drink beer nearly as much as you think you do." He's like, "To be perfectly honest, I think you'd be going down the wrong path going into the brewmaster program. I think you'd be better suited towards distilling." And the more and more I got thinking about it, the more and more I realized that, as much as I don't like to admit it, he was right. And
Right.
he kind of guided me into that path, where he just kind of reaffirmed some of the thoughts that I was already having and encouraged me to just take that leap of faith and
Okay.
do it.
Right. For our listeners who may not know the difference between a brewmaster and a distilling education, could you perhaps let them know what is the difference between the two of them?
Sure. So Brewmaster is specifically to beer and only to beer and all kinds of beer. And that was a 2-year program to learn all the different aspects about the different ingredients of beer and all of the grain base, how to make beer, how to properly make beer, and kind of what you can do with it. Whereas distilling, it's is specifically to spirits. It's specifically to hard liquor. So it's not wine, it's not champagne. It is specifically to hard liquor. So tequila, rum, whiskey, vodka, and with distilling, how to use the still, the science and chemistry behind all of those chemical reactions that happen in the still in order to actually get your finished product.
Pursuing entrepreneurship in the spirits industry can be both exciting and challenging. I can just imagine. Were there any other influential figures, mentors, educational experiences that perhaps stand out for you that kind of guided you to embark on this new professional journey? Other than your husband, of course.
One experience in particular, actually. Um, we had an assignment in school. It was called the challenge. So we either had to come up with a totally new, innovative idea, put our spin on an existing idea, or kind of reinvent an existing thing. And that's actually when I was talking with my husband about it. That's actually when I came up with pepper pot vodka, my um, right now my only liquor, my only product. But he loves Caesars, but hates the taste of any form of alcohol. He just
Okay.
It's not him. Another one of my best friends loves Caesars, but hates vodka in particular. So she started using spiced rum. So him and I were talking. He's like, "There's got to be a better way to do this," and he suggested, he's like, "Well, what about Montreal steak spice?" I'm like, I have issues, but
Yeah, it might be workable.
it might be workable. We can try that. And my fear was that it would be really salty, which of course it was. But for the first time ever in the history of our relationship, we didn't have any Montreal steak spice in our pantry. So I ended up going a different route with mixing a couple of other things, and I got the smoky mesquite flavor that is in pepper pot today.
Wow.
And I took that for that assignment to do the presentation and presented it in a Caesar and a Paloma and just by itself. And I ended up winning a prize for, I think it was a best innovation or something like that. And it was one of my
Congratulations. That's great.
teachers. Yeah, it was one of my teachers, Andrea, that encouraged me to pursue this, because she's like, "You've taken an existing product that was done poorly and you've completely turned it around."
Right.
And she's like, "I really think that you should pursue this. I think this is something that you should pitch to the LCBO." So if it wasn't for her extra push, I don't think I would have done
Okay. That name, Pepper Pot Vodka, very
it.
interesting. How did you come up with that?
So pepper potting is actually a maneuver that's performed while doing patrols and you come under contact.
Oh, okay.
So you essentially, like, if you're on patrol and you come under contact, you lie flat down on the ground, you get down, and then in
Right.
order to make yourself a more difficult target to hit, you kind of pop up, take a quick bound, and go back down. And then you
Okay.
pop up, take a quick bound, and go back down. And so it's called pepper potting. And you do it long enough and you get a little spicy and a little salty and kind of want to drink afterwards. So that's where the name came from.
I like it. It's really unique. So I'm glad you explained the history behind that. Are you working on any other products at the moment?
Yes, I'm actually about to start a gin.
Nice.
It's a flavored gin that, again, while I did it while I was in school. I'm just tweaking the recipe a little bit. So it's going to be more of a citrus forward based gin, and it's going to be blended with raspberries, strawberries, and blueberries to give it a really nice full bodied flavor um, that can easily be enjoyed just by itself or mixed with. I think we did it with 7 Up and club soda when we were in school, and it was delicious, if
So
I don't
no,
say
that's
so
great.
myself.
That's two options, either as a mixer or just straight up. That's fantastic. And what's the name of the gin?
I haven't quite decided yet. It is to be determined. I'm open to suggestions. I think so far I'm kind of settling on berry bomb gin, but we'll see.
Okay, so to be announced then.
Yes.
That's great. That's all exciting. And so then you've got a vodka, you've got a gin. Are you going to explore any other types of spirits, perhaps a cognac or
Whiskey is probably going to be the next one.
whiskey?
Um, I like whiskey. I'm a whiskey girl, and I think going back to the traditions that I had at the regiment, it fits. I just think it's something that I would have a lot of fun doing, and
Right.
I think it's something that would really allow me to kind of like give something back to my regiment,
That's
and
fantastic.
hopefully they can use that whiskey for toasting the meat
Instead,
on.
and when they toast to Miranda and her
Yeah.
creation, right? Okay, so going back to the Canadian Armed Forces,
Mhm.
that is definitely an alternative career for most Canadian women. So, what were some of the key factors or experiences that led you to make the decision to join the Canadian Armed Forces? I believe you served, what, 13 years?
Just shy of 13, yeah.
Just 13 years. And how did you commit to that life? Like, that is very, very different.
Yes, it is very different. Um, when I was younger, I was involved in Air Cadets and went up
Okay.
through the Air Cadet system from the age of 12 to just before I turned 19. So those being my formative years, it really helped me develop an appreciation for tradition and um, the military as a whole, as well as it developed skills like in me as a person, where you have time appreciation, respect for your elders, along with obviously what my parents would teach. Has just further reinforced it. And when I got out of cadets, something was missing. It just I missed the structure, the camaraderie, and the friends that you make just in that type of environment. And I think it was probably about 4 years later, 4 or 5 years later, I decided to get into the army.
Right.
And I joined the primary reserves here in London.
Okay.
And I was armored reconnaissance for about my first year. And then an opportunity presented itself where I could have a full time employment, but I would have to change trades to uh, administration. So I became a clerk and then was full time for the next 11 and a half, 12 and a half years. And it just fit. I felt very comfortable in that environment. My uncle was Reg Force Navy for 25 years. My mom and stepdad were both cadet officers. So I was just surrounded by the military for most of my life. So it seemed like a natural progression for me, really.
Yeah, it does, especially when you have family members involved in it, right? And you got your influence right there. Let's jump back to the distilling industry. During COVID, we had material shortages, right? And that's when I think you started your business. Also, in that kind of business, you've got like odd hours, extensive rules and regulations. For people who don't know, you should take us into a little bit of an educational format of what the LCBO, which is the Liquor Control Board of Ontario, how they operate, because it's totally different from the United States or other provinces
Yes.
in Canada. So, if you wouldn't mind touching on that.
So I started my program at Niagara in January of 2021. And that's kind of where I first got exposed to material shortages and um, shipping issues. And then when I started my business in July of 2021 and started getting on with Pepper Pot, again, it was the same shortages. I couldn't even find a glass producer in Canada that could make something for me within my budget. I ended up having to go to the US, which I I wasn't opposed to, but I would have preferred to keep it Canadian.
Right.
So there were a whole other slew of issues with that importing. Even if it is just glass, importing it can be a little tricky. But then when it comes to the actual LCBO, as a virtual distiller, being like a baker without a kitchen, I don't have my own storefront. I don't have my own brick and mortar.
Right.
So really my only game in town is the LCBO in order to get my product out there. And
Yeah,
they
for our American audience, it's not that you can go to the corner liquor store and
no,
pick up. There's only one customer, and that's
yeah,
controlled by the
exactly.
government, right? And
100%.
that's
Yeah.
a tough gig.
It is a tough gig. It was from my first pitch to being on shelf, it was about a year. It was a year long process.
Wow.
So it was tricky. And it's still a very steep learning curve. It's close to vertical at this point, not so much of a curve, really. But there are a lot of rules and regulations to learn, and I'm learning new things every day. And with the LCBO, because they essentially control the liquor industry in Ontario, you have to play their game and play by their rules. So getting listed, yes, if they decide to pick up your product, you have to make sure that you pass their very stringent chemical analysis process.
Right.
Which is great because I mean it ensures that you're actually getting a high quality, high end product, regardless of what price point it is. Um, but then you have to look at their labeling regulations, and their labeling regulations are paired up with the Canadian Food Inspection Agency regulations and the Canadian Food Health Association regulations. So you're having to abide by multiple guidelines for something as simple as your label. And then when you actually look at your distribution regulations and your licensing regulations, then you're not only working with the LCBO, but you're working with the Alcohol and Gaming Commission of Ontario. And again, you're having to go back to Canadian Food Inspection Agency regulations and having to abide by certain licensing requirements because, you know, a manufacturer's license gives you license to sell it. That's about it. It doesn't really give you, unless you have a brick and mortar place and own a still, you can't produce it. You can sell it, but you can't produce it. So
Right.
there's all these little nuances that you have to kind of weave and navigate your way through in order to actually become successful with the industry.
So did you have help in
Yes.
getting your product into the LCBO? Because I'm just like rolling my eyes. I go, wow, that's hard. It's harder than what I'm doing.
Very much I had help. And my contract distiller, Barry, has been phenomenal with helping me. And he has been absolutely a godsend. If he wasn't kind of there to answer my questions when I didn't quite understand something that I had read,
Right.
or just couldn't find the information, period. I don't know what I probably would have spent so many extra hours looking in all the wrong places to find the answer that I was looking
Okay,
for.
so you had some resources. I'm trying to think. I think Barry's office is just around the corner from mine. It was
Oh
Stillwater,
yeah,
you said?
yeah,
Yeah, Barry Stein.
yeah. The
Yeah,
berries are great. I love the
I
berries.
did chat with him a bit about some product creation of my own, and yeah, he's very informative. But
Yes.
you're right. I don't think anybody can venture into this type of business without some professional consultation and people that have years and how to navigate through the rules
Yeah.
and the regulations. Because it's Canada has one set of challenges, and I don't know if you plan to expand into the United States. That's going to be another type of challenge where, yes, professional help is definitely suggested.
Yes, definitely. It has been tricky, but like I said, I'm still learning new things every day, and it's I'm sure the larger I get, the more complicated it will get. That kind of seems how how the industry goes.
Yeah.
But yes, an agent or a great point of contact in the distilling industry is an absolute gem if you can get one.
Yeah, and I think not only that, but a person that's considering a career in distilling, they should have some sort of educational background
Mhm.
because you formulated your own recipe,
Yes.
which is incredible.
Thank
So
you.
I think that would be very advantageous, as opposed to having someone else create it for you. You found the exact taste that you were looking for, so that gives you personal satisfaction.
Very much so.
Okay. So if you can travel back and have a heart to heart conversation with your younger self, what personal advice and words of encouragement would you offer her, particularly in terms of pursuing a career in distilling industry or entrepreneurship?
If I could have a conversation with younger me,
Mhm.
to be honest,
Younger
I'd tell her
Miranda.
not. Well, I'd probably tell her to cool her jets a little bit and not to bite off more than she can chew. But I wouldn't change a thing. I would tell her just stay the course and don't let ever like don't let anybody tell you that you can't do what you want to do. Um,
Okay. Fair
don't
enough.
don't don't buy into that. Um, and stop second guessing yourself so much. But everything I have done in my life to this point has led me here. And other than that piece of advice, I would just say read more on the guidelines and try to learn as much of that as you can before you get into the industry rather than learning as you go.
And do you think being a particular age and entering this line of business or alternative career, does it have any restrictions, or does it matter whether you're a young person in high school or someone that's maybe in their mid 30s, 40s, they're not happy with their career and they're looking for a career change? Do you think there'd be any obstacles for either age group, or as long as you've got a passion and determination, you'll be successful no matter the age you're at?
I think as long as you have the passion and determination in this industry, you can be successful. Yes. And to never be afraid to ask for help. That's probably the biggest piece of advice. As long as you're not afraid of asking for help and you can accept constructive criticism, any I think anybody really 50 and below, between actually even probably 55 to
And
down to
younger.
maybe
Yep.
25 would be successful in this industry. You just got to
Great.
have the drive.
Okay, that's good. So, as an entrepreneur, networking and building meaningful connections, they can play a pivotal role in your journey. So, can you share an opportunity that came from networking efforts and how it impacted your own personal growth?
Actually, yeah, my one teacher, Andrea, is the one who introduced me to Holly, um, to kind of steer me on this path that I'm on now, to help guide me on this path that I'm on now. And I think without that, without going to school and without that introduction and without networking with Holly, I don't think or networking with Andrea, I don't think I would be anywhere close to where I am today. I don't know if I would have found Holly on my own or gone with another agent. And they got me set up with Barry Stein. So that's been incredibly helpful. And I think had that connection not been made, I would have been in a very different boat than what I am now.
Yeah, I have to agree because actually Holly Wyatt from Connect Brands is the one that put us together because
Yeah.
you're working with her, I'm working with her, and so it's great. I made a new personal relationship here, and then I'm pretty sure I might be calling you for some advice. And by all means, you have my number, and we can go back
Absolutely.
and forth. I'm looking forward to that.
Same.
London is not such a big drive from Toronto, so that'd be great.
No.
So being a trailblazer in a male dominated industry, you have your triumphs and you also have your challenges. Do you have any moments where you doubt yourself or you're skeptical about your own abilities and are you thinking, did I make the right choice? Should I, continue going forward? Have you had those moments of hesitations and doubts?
Yeah, but not probably not in the way you would think. I didn't have those doubts when it came to being in the male dominated industry. Obviously, with being in the army for under 13 years and being in that male dominated industry, working with a bunch of dudes wasn't that was the least of my concerns. The heavy lifting, like the literal heavy lifting, with when you're lifting grain bags and 20-liter buckets and like when they're full of wort or whatever fermentation that you're trying to work with, and lifting a 20-liter bucket full of stuff up and over my head to try to get it into a fermentation
Wow.
tank isn't exactly the easiest thing to do sometimes. So it was the literal heavy lifting
That's physically
that
demanding on anyone,
yeah,
even
it made me
even for a male,
question.
right?
Yeah, it's physically demanding for anybody, but like when you're short and have little arms and little hands like I do, it makes it extra challenging sometimes.
But you got through it.
But yeah, so that was probably really the only time that I second guessed uh, getting into manufacturing or distilling as a whole, was just the the literal lifting. But I mean, you find ways, like just like anything, you adapt and overcome and you move on.
Well, the thing is, you're personally doing it. If you're in my shoes, which I don't have a background like you, I would probably have to outsource, and somebody else would do the heavy lifting, so I wouldn't have to worry about that, right? Okay, so the distilling industry, it's ever evolving, and staying ahead of the curve requires continuous learning. How do you remain proactive in acquiring industry knowledge and expertise?
A lot of times I I look up spirits magazines or spirits articles based out of Europe. I found, and we even discussed this in school, but I found that usually the trends that are happening in Europe and the UK are months, if not years, ahead of what happens in North America as far as the spirits industry is concerned. It always seems that things that do well there take about a year or so to filter over here and have the same results that they did in Europe. It's just if you can, you know, find the right thing, the right niche for you that's doing well in Europe and bring it over here. It's slow to start until it becomes trendy, and then once it becomes trendy, you already have a base. You already have
Right.
that foot in the door to set yourself up for success. So I look to Europe, and there's Distiller Magazine. There's a couple of organizations that you can become a member of as a business owner for distilling. They usually do like a quarterly magazine, quarterly update kind of thing,
Right.
and on like spirits news, distillers news, new equipment, and upcoming trends and things like that. So they usually have their finger on the pulse for that.
That's very good. That's something I just learned today. So, as a distiller and entrepreneur, your work undoubtedly has a lasting impact on your customers and community. Can you share maybe a warm story of how one of your products resonated with a customer and how that made you feel?
Um, yeah, oddly enough, I had a customer who, well, a couple of small incidents. One customer wasn't a huge fan of Caesars, and I was doing an in-store tasting, and he had said, like he never really had a good Caesar, didn't really much like the taste of vodka. I'm like, well, then try this because my husband is in the same boat, and part of the reason why this product is even here. And so he tried it, and he's just like, wow, this okay. This is the only way I'm gonna have Caesars now. Like this actually makes it bearable. I'm just like, perfect, glad I could help, kind of thing. And another one of my customers actually posted on their Facebook that they used my vodka as a steak marinade for some tomahawk steaks that they had bought. And
Nice.
and
That's really good.
it worked out really well. And they were absolutely blown away with it. They said it was like some of the best steak that they had ever had, and that it all boiled down to my vodka. So I thought that was pretty cool. I mean, like I've used it as a like a beef marinade on a roast, but I hadn't done steaks with it, and I'm happy it turned out because yeah, that was a happy accident that I found out it worked. So I'm glad they actually experimented.
Well, I got a business idea for you, and perhaps you can do that down the future. Maybe we can collaborate. And
Okay.
that is maybe creating a book with recipes with your products.
I love that. That
That'd
sounds
be
great.
awesome. Yeah, yeah, we can chat on that for sure. So as an entrepreneur, what do you believe are the key attributes that can set someone apart and make them successful business owners? You mentioned it earlier, and I just wanted to elaborate more. I know that yeah, hard work for sure, and structure and dedication. But can you add anything else that comes to mind from your own personal experience, of course?
Honestly, you got to have the drive. You have to really want to do it because there are going to be hardships. There are going to be bad days, and there's going to be a lot of them. Um, and there's going to be hiccups. You're going to run into problems. It will happen. It's not a it might, it will happen. And as long as you go into it with the mindset of these things are going to happen, I'll prepare for them the best way that I can, but not to take it too hard when these things do happen because it happens to everybody. It's not like the world has a vendetta out against you or
Right.
anything like that. Is that these hiccups are going to happen, and as long as you can prepare for that and have the drive to push through it, and keep going and to stay the course and to ask for help, and to never be afraid to ask for help, um, then you're setting yourself up for a plethora of successes in the future as long as you can swallow your pride, ask for help, and
Right.
realize that you are going to have bad days and that these bad days may last a while. Your product may fail. You have to. We had a saying in the army that if you fail to plan, you plan to fail, and
Nice.
you have to expect these things are going to happen, and you can't take it personally, and you just have to learn from the situation. You have to learn from the incident and regroup and do it again and keep going and keep pushing and uh, keep pursuing what you keep pursuing what you want.
Exactly. And I'm glad you brought that point up because a lot of people think, oh, it's so nice to be self-employed and being an entrepreneur, but they always see the end results and they don't realize that maybe that person was at it for decades, have had numerous failures, but from those failures, they were learning experiences, and not to give up, right? The moment you give up, that's when you really fail. So
Mm-hmm.
it's important that
Exactly.
you brought that up because it's hard. It doesn't matter what you do out there. Like if even if you just get a traditional career, you could be a teacher, you could be a lawyer. You're going to suffer failures in those careers as well. And so entrepreneurship is no different. So yeah, that motivation, that drive, and not giving up. I think those are really key aspects that we need to drive home to our listeners.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Now, I know entrepreneurship can be exhilarating and also demanding, and it's important to have a healthy work life balance. And how do you ensure that you make time for your personal well-being and your family?
I try to do as much as I can during what would be regular business hours. So if I have to send emails, do market research, work on business plans, or do banking, anything like that, I try to do as much of it as I can during a regular work week. Obviously, there's going to be exceptions where, like a lot of in-store tastings are done on weekends, and um, sometimes my husband and I will do them together. Sometimes we won't. Sometimes he's handling one while I'm handling the other because we're double and triple booked. Um, so uh, I find that as long as I try to get the bulk of the work that I can completed in a regular kind of work schedule, it's fairly easy to keep the work life balance, but it it isn't always like that. You just kind of have to take those hits as they come.
So, any last piece of advice for someone that's going to try to break the barriers and pursue distilling as maybe a full-time career? What could you
Get the
impart for them?
education.
Get the education, number one.
Get the education if you can.
Where would they
It
go, though?
helps.
Where would they go?
So Niagara College has the Artisan Distilling program.
Okay,
To my knowledge, they are the only accredited distilling program
good to
in
know.
Canada.
Hmm.
I think they're coming out with another one in BC. But right now, that's the only one that I know of. Harriet Watt University does a distance learning for their diploma in distilling. They're based out of Edinburgh, Scotland.
Right.
There's also the Institute of Brewing and Distilling, which also does distance learning for their certificate and diploma in distilling, and they're based out of London, England.
Hmm.
So if you can get the education, it absolutely helps. Um, but aside from that, do your research. Do your
That's
research.
important.
Whether, do market research, depending on what you want to get into. Do research on the ins and outs of the business. Talk to as many people as you can. Go do distillery tours and talk to the distillers. Talk to the business owners if you can. Talk to the staff to find out if it's something that you even want to pursue. Because yeah, the hours can be really wonky. You can be working 7 days a week for 4 months, and then you could be working 2 or 3 days a week for a couple of months. You know, if you're not okay with all aspects of the industry, like and the wonky work hours, the dealing with suppliers, the navigating the rules and regulations of the industry, like there, if you're not okay with any of that, then either find a way to be okay with it or outsource it if you can. And if you still um, can't function with those hiccups, then maybe get into a different aspect of the industry rather than distilling and being a distiller, maybe get into working at a distillery and doing promotional work, or still being in the spirits industry at a distillery, just maybe not as an actual distiller themselves. It is a great industry regardless of what part you play in it, but it is a lot of work. So
No, no,
be
that's great
prepared.
advice because you gave either entrepreneurship or just an alternative career. So you've given them a couple of options. How long is that program at Niagara College?
So it's a post grad program, so it's 8 months.
8 months.
Yeah, it
Okay,
was 8 months.
that's pretty quick.
Yeah, it went by pretty quick.
It's
But
wonderful.
with that program, you're basically you're learning as if you don't know anything about the industry. Yes, it helps to have a background,
Sure.
but you're doing sensory analysis, you're doing the lab testing and how to read hydrometers correctly, or and then you're building mash bills, and you're learning how to actually physically produce the product from start to finish. And then one of the one of the assignments that you have to do is developing a product from concept to on shelf. And that's done near the end of your second term. But being immersed in that and learning all of the ins and outs and all of the other nuances that come with distilling,
Hmm.
um, it kind of opens your eyes and bursts your bubble a little bit, but
Right.
it's a good burst. It's I don't know if I would have been able to pull off this career without that education.
Well, Miranda, I really enjoyed our time together. I'd like to provide my support for all women entrepreneurs that appear on the show. Can you please tell our listeners where they can find your products and how they can reach out if they had any questions regarding a career in distilling, or perhaps if they don't have that product of yours in their particular LCBO, how would they go about in asking for it?
Sure. So you can find the locations that I'm actually in store at on my website at ironsidedistilling.ca. I'm also on Instagram at ironside_distilling. And I usually post on, and I'm on Facebook as well at Ironside Distilling. And I usually post on all of those things when we're going to be doing in-store tastings and stuff like that. So if you kind of want to try before you buy, it's an option too. I'm going to be at SIP Niagara at the end of September. So September 30th and October 1st. I'm going to be at the SIP Niagara event, and we're going to be doing some tastings there as well. And if they did have any questions, they can feel free to reach out to me on any of those platforms.
Wonderful.
And there's a contact us option on my website as well that goes directly to me at info@ironsidedistilling.ca. And I'd be more than happy to answer any questions.
That's fantastic. Again, I want to thank you. And I also want to thank our listeners for tuning in. And I hope they share this episode of Distilling Spirits with Miranda Mazur of Ironside Distilling. This will give others an opportunity to hear about the show and this wonderful products that she will be creating for us. Don't forget to hit subscribe so that you don't miss out on future shows. Make sure you come and interact with me over on Instagram. It's a hashtag Only Women Entrepreneurs. And if you require further information or guidance for career selection or starting up your own business, be sure to look me up on my website, onlywomenentrepreneurs.com, where I offer individualized training and business programs as well as personal development. I'm looking forward to connecting with everyone on my next episode, and thank you so much for tuning in.